Welcome back to another Share Your Light episode. And as I've mentioned many times, these episodes mean so much to me, and I hope to you as well, that we get to share members of our listening community who are stepping more into their power, their light, their purpose. They're finding what path works the best for them. And hopefully this will serve as some sort of inspiration for you to realize that you can follow your own dream and passion as well. And today we're really excited to welcome Haley Bea. She's a psychic medium and host of Opening the Door podcast. In her psychic mediumship work, she loves to bring through spirit guides, your higher self, and loved ones who have crossed over to deliver potent messages. Haley invites all those who are ready to start their spiritual journey with joy and without fear through her work and on her podcast. She believes that if everyone were more connected to their intuition, the world would be a much more vibrant place. So welcome, Haley. Thank you for doing this with me today.
Hi, Denise. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to chat.
Well, what I love is that, and this fascinates me, is working with guides, because I think that a lot of people who are highly intuitive, they'll either go through the guide route or they'll go directly to who they're connecting with. So it always fascinates me because I do the direct connection and you do the guide. So how did you figure out that you were even connecting with guides?
Ooh, what a good question. So I started sort of connecting with my guides it was sort of one of the first things that I did at the beginning of my spiritual journey. So I had started meditating like a few years before I sort of had my own spiritual awakening. I just one day woke up or was at work or something, and I was like, you know what? I think I'm going to start meditating. So I downloaded a meditation app, and I sort of just started on a morning meditation journey. And that, I think, really just helped get my mind quiet, which helps us hear our guides better. So that was sort of my building block to being able to hear my guides. And then when I sort of plunged into my spiritual journey, I was listening to a lot of podcasts and reading, but mostly listening to podcasts. It was like my main source of learning throughout, especially even still. But it was my big source of learning in the beginning. And I was just, I don't know, I guess it just started popping up on a lot of episodes of podcasts I was listening to, working with your guides. There were some specific episodes about that. And so then I was like, okay, I'm going to try that. Mm-hmm. And I had still had my sort of meditation, my morning meditations going. And so what I started doing was I had no thought process on who they were and like if they were really around. So what I just started doing was sort of just opening the channel to them and being like, hey, I would love to meet you in a dream. And also, they have never come to me in a dream. It's not a way. It's not a way in these years of working with them that they've presented themselves to me. Not that I remember, at least maybe in some dream I don't remember, but not one that I've woken up and been like, wow, I just met a guide. But so I just sort of started talking to them at the end of my day in bed. I would be like, I'd love to meet you in a dream. And I would just like tell them about my day, basically. And so that sort of opened up the channel to working with them. And sort of after I felt like I had a concrete idea and feeling that they were around, that's when I started asking for signs. So it's like I established a connection with them when I didn't quite feel them there. And then I started asking for signs to sort of get them to communicate back with me, if that makes sense.
It makes perfect sense. So do you feel a difference when you're connecting with a guide versus a loved one in spirit?
Yes, for sure. So when I'm connecting with a guide, like if I'm reading for someone, when I'm connecting with a guide, two things. Their energy feels different to me. So what happens is, for my process is, if I'm reading somebody, I have this sort of room within my mind's eye that I invite any loved ones or guides to come through and deliver messages. So I'm really seeing within my mind's eye who appears in front of me. And I find that guides sometimes have less human features that I can pull from. They're showing me a little bit less human features, and their energy feels different. It feels like there's sort of this deeper rooted wisdom that they're tapping into, that I can sort of just feel that is a guide's presence as opposed to if there's a loved one coming through, they're showing me their features, they're showing me where they lived, they're showing me a memory of the person who's sitting in front of me, they're showing me all these things, their personality that I can confirm with the person sitting in front of me. And guides are a little bit more like, that sort of deeper rooted ancient wisdom feeling.
That's a really good way to describe it, because when I have connected with guides or the angelic realm, or I have, not that I don't greatly respect the people in spirit that I connect with, but there's a sense of reverence. There's a sense of, it's just a very different feeling. And it's hard to put into words. You articulated that beautifully. So this is another one of my things, is that because when you can connect with a memory, a feeling, a physical attribute, that's evidential, and someone can validate that for you. How do you switch gears with saying, okay, I know I'm sensing, I'm seeing, meeting this guide in this room that I've developed in my mind. Do you give the message the same way as you would to someone who is meeting their grandpa?
Ooh, that's a great question. Sort of something for me to think about, I think. So when a message comes through from a guide, a lot of the time it feels, and I'm definitely working a little bit more into channeling. I was just channeling, like really strictly channeling somebody's guide a few weeks ago, and it felt very different than being a conduit, if that makes sense. So I'm definitely sort of dabbling in that now, especially with guides. But I think delivering a message from a guide, they'll sort of hit on a point in the person's life that they need to work on a little bit more. It'll be like, are you getting enough sleep? Because your guide's sort of saying that you're really not sleeping lately. And then they'll be like, yeah, that is true. So they're sort of, the guide will sort of hit on something and then give the advice. So hit on evidence and then give that advice. And sometimes the advice from guides can be a lot more like a blanket approach to something rather than something a little bit more earthbound and specific from a loved one. So your very well loved grandmother might come through and be like, you can meet me in the kitchen and we can talk then. And I would love for you to, make the meatballs I used to make. That's a way that we can connect. So it'll be something a little bit more like that from a loved one. And then from a guide, it's like, sort of the bigger picture questions. I think guides are really good at tapping into.
And I know that a lot of people will call for a reading or contact you for a reading, and they want to know, who are my guides? What do they want to tell me? It's a different energy than I want to connect with one of my loved ones or my pet or, something else. So do you do specific readings just for guides and others just for people?
So I have a mini reading on my website, actually, that is specifically for your guides. So we connect in with your guides and we get messages from your guides. Like, what do your guides want you to know right now? Basically is the prompt. So you buy that mini reading and I'll send you a recording about me tapping into your guides specifically. What do they want you to know right now? And that's actually one of my favorite questions to ask. If I don't really have something specific, it's just one of my favorite questions to ask if I'm working with Oracle or if I just feel like I need to tap in with my guides. Like, what do you want me to know right now? Because if you're trying to receive on a specific question, that's great. But I think sometimes our guides have a lot more to offer than our specific questions. So if that's a great way to sort of gain knowledge from them. So yeah, I do offer a mini reading on my website that is guide specific, and then Zoom virtual in-person readings also. It's rare that I don't touch on guides in those as well. So really depends on what people are looking for, but it is definitely one of my favorite things.
So it's easy to tell that you have a real passion for this work, that you love being a messenger, that you're doing this for service. That's clear. But how did you have Opening the Door podcast? How did your journey into the psychic mediumship? Because you mentioned, the meditation and how that led to meeting the guides and finding this, and it's that curious mind. And I think for anyone who's wired this way, having a curious mind is a huge part of, there's no bottom. Nobody can ever be the best at this, which I love. I absolutely love that you have to find the way it works for you and be the best you can be. But once you get into the comparative game, it's crash and burn. tell us about your journey a little bit, because I know that's the premise of your podcast, is for maybe people who are trying to figure out, where am I on my own path?
Yeah, for sure. So when I was little, like young, I think my first little spirit ghost sighting was when I was like 6 or 7 years old. So the house that I grew up in definitely had a lot of spirit activity anyway. So I guess I was just open to it. And so, I was just able to see what was going on a little bit. It sort of started young, and then it sort of tapped out during when I was growing up a little bit, not as many experiences. And it came to, so the reason the podcast is called Opening the Door is because it came to a point where I had a lot of spirit activity in my bedroom growing up, and I was just feeling really out of control. And I felt like I don't know how to control this, and I don't like this because I'm being told that this is scary, and I don't want to deal with this. I don't want this to be happening. So I basically created a door within my mind's eye, which I didn't know was my mind's eye at the time, right? It was in my imagination at the time. And so I created this door, and to me, that door represented basically the door to this spirit realm that was coming through to me. And so I shut it up tight. I put chains on it in my mind's eye. I locked it up. I did every single thing. And that represented being closed off to this type of stuff. I was like, I just don't want it. And every now and then I would get curious and be like, oh, I haven't had a little ghost sighting. And so I would go into my mind's eye and open my door up a little bit because I missed it or something, And so that's sort of where that name came from, because eventually I did feel like, and this was after the meditation started, and so this was probably about 2020 or 2021, I really felt like if I don't learn what is going on with me, I'm just going to be so regretful in like 20 or 30 years. I'm just going to regret this so much. And so that was where my deeper spiritual journey started. It was from a future feeling of regret, just knowing that I would feel regret if I didn't start. So that's where it began. And the podcast didn't start until about a year ago. It started in August 2022. So we're in September 2023 now. So we're about a year out. I was taking classes, I was doing the work personally, and I was practicing with people, reading other people and all this stuff. And then I felt like I just had this spark of inspiration that felt like I would love to help people not feel afraid. I would love to help people feel like they're within a community where they can grow and where they can learn about like every different topic within spirituality. And so it really grew from this feeling of wanting to help people approach this work with joy and without fear and without feeling alone too, because I think when you feel really closed off to this, but it's still happening to you, it can be kind of a lonely experience. So that's the journey of the podcast. And it has just been so much fun. This is a plug. Denise has actually been on the podcast, and that was a really fun conversation. Denise was actually, I think you were within the first 10 episodes.
Oh my.
So that was, yeah, it was super fun. So if you are listening and you want to hear Denise as a guest on Opening the Door, I want to say it's episode 6, but I can't quite remember. But yeah, she's in there. So that's super fun too.
But see, this is what I love though, is spirit is putting out the breadcrumbs for you. You had this connection, and my take on this, Haley, is that I think anyone can do this. I don't think we have some special magic wand. I think we've just worked that muscle, and it does come more easily to some people, but I don't think that it's exclusive to a certain, nobody's super special with this. Maybe other people feel differently, that's fine, but I just love your attitude of anyone can do this, and I want to make it more comfortable for you, because I think it can be scary, it can be overwhelming, especially without support. If you don't have familial support, or you're in a part of the world where it's not deemed acceptable, or there's a strong religious background where it's always been seen as fill in the blank. So with that though, are you basically clairaudient? Do you basically hear things? Because you've mentioned, hearing the sounds quite a bit. But you're also very clairvoyant from seeing the door. Okay.
Yes, right. So my two main clairs that I work with are clairvoyance and clairaudience. Definitely clairvoyance was my stronger Claire when I first started, and then clairaudience sort of became also strong as I continued to go along in this work, which was really cool. I didn't really expect it. But yeah, I find it to be sometimes a little bit more of a clearer way just for me to receive sometimes, for sure.
And do you find that your skills continue to develop and that more is added as you do this work?
Yeah, I have really found, so when I first started doing classes, it was really that clairvoyance and clairaudience. And as I continued to practice with people, especially connecting in with loved ones who have passed over, I think even within like the last 8 or 9 months, my just like body feelings, so feeling something in my chest, feeling something in my throat, feeling something in my back, that has really come through as well, which has been actually very, very surprising, because I tend to be all up here in terms of like, I like to be in the clouds and be all up in these upper chakras. And I think that feeling within the body is really important and can be a really cool part of this work too.
And it's a beautiful example of how this will grow and evolve as you grow and evolve. And that's so, so important, because I think it can be scary. As we said a minute ago, it can be overwhelming. But with that, it's also getting ready to go to the next level. And so going back to what I started to say a few minutes ago is that the breadcrumbs being put out is you got this urge, you open the door, and then it's like, okay, I'm going to take some classes, I'm going to listen to podcasts, I'm going to read, I'm going to grow. And then it seems like you did that, and then I'm going to start doing readings for other people, and then the idea for the podcast. So it feels like you're being very divinely led to do what comes next, and the people that you need to meet are showing up on your path as well. And could you talk about that, how serendipitous things can be when this work is unfolding?
Ooh, yeah, for sure. I definitely agree. I think if anybody's listening to this and feeling like they're ready for things to unfold, I definitely invite you to tell the universe that, or God, or whatever you want to call it, because I think that can be really powerful too, is to say, I'm ready to step into this, put the people that I need to have in my path, put the things that I need to have in my path into my path, because I feel ready. But yeah, so as it unfolded, it just felt so natural. It didn't feel like there wasn't any like crunchiness or resistance. It really felt like, okay, now I'm gonna start practicing to read for people. And that's one of the main reasons why I took classes, was because it gave a structure for how to even learn how to do that. I think some people can just figure it out, but I needed a structure, so that's what I did. And yeah, I mean, even with the podcast, the first person who I invited on was a very good friend of mine who's also a psychic medium, Anthony Lights. And we just ended up, that felt divine too, because I found him randomly on Instagram, and I just was like, I just have a feeling I'm just going to ask him. And now we're like such great friends, and it's so great to have somebody like so close on this path. So yeah, the universe will just sort of start to put things in front of you. And I think that's really also where the power of presence comes through, and meditation too. I know it's so boring to always hear about the meditation on podcasts, but it is important for your just feeling present and being able to notice those things. Because I think probably if I wasn't present, I would have been able to pass a lot of those things by, but just listening to those inner nudges and allowing things to flow, I think can be really helpful. I hope that made sense. I think I might have tangent.
You didn't tangent at all. And you made an incredibly important point about finding like-minded people to share the journey with, because it can feel very isolating at times. It can feel it's intense in a good way. I mean, I love the intensity of it, but you need to have that steam valve, and having someone who understands what it takes physically, mentally, and spiritually to do readings. And I think a lot of folks, and myself included, when I first started doing this work, all I wanted to do, I just want to do readings. That's all. I want to help people. I want to be a conduit. And then as you start to do this more professionally or more as a practice, you realize how much more it's much more intricate than I'm just going to throw the cards. And as you grow and develop, and your work grows and develops. So have you seen that in your progress as well, that you're needing that steam valve, so to speak, to be able to turn it on and off?
Yes, for sure. And community, I think, really helps with that too. So yeah, I think when I first started opening up, and tell me if I'm going in the right direction with your question, but yeah, when I first started opening up, I felt like I was receiving so often. And I was like, woo, 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 receive, receive, receive. And then when you start sort of deep diving, you realize that it's actually okay to not be receiving all the time, you know? I think we have this thing where, or back in the day, everybody's watching Long Island Medium, right? And she's like going to the grocery store and giving people these readings and like all this stuff. So you kind of imagine that that's the way it like should be or something. But I think there is such power in going to the grocery store and not receiving anything because it's so much more peaceful.
100%.
Yeah.
And it makes you a clearer conduit and channel when you are working. And plus,
Yes.
it's disrespectful to blindside people with readings. A personal opinion
I agree.
that drive-by readings are not cool because you don't know where someone is emotionally. You don't know their belief system. That's really a strong conviction of mine.
Yep.
But no, you were definitely on the right track with that. So turning it on and off, and also with that community piece, and I think that's a huge part of your podcast is you have a younger demographic for the most part. So you're going to use, you're meeting people where they are beautifully. And there is no age limit or, location or there's none of that involved in this because it does give us all a unity. But I think that you're able to bring up topics that might be really relevant for the demographic that you're focusing on.
Yeah, for sure. And something that we talk about a lot on the podcast is what's trending on social media, like what are people talking about? Are people talking about the divine feminine? Okay, well, I'll have a guest on that sort of debunks the mainstream pop TikTok version of divine feminine and what that means. And so I do have a lot of fun doing that, is sort of bringing on timely topics that are trending or have been trending on the socials, which are a total double-edged sword, by the way, but they're important for connection and all that good stuff. But yeah, I think I do have a really fun time sort of bringing on those timely topics and seeing what we can get out of them.
And that is another way to normalize what is your opinion as a psychic, as a medium, as an intuitive, as a sensitive on what you're picking up and getting bombarded with on social media. Or sometimes I'm sure you get this as well because you're highly sensitive and in tune, is you'll be reading something on media and you'll start to feel yourself pulled into the vortex and then realize, oh, holy shit, this isn't real. This doesn't resonate. And I think by bringing up those topics, you're helping people fine tune their own station a little bit so that they'll have more discernment with whether or not to believe what they're reading, or if how to decide what you want to spend your time listening to and watching. And that's a great way to do that.
Thank
And
you.
it's
Yeah.
wonderful.
Thanks. Yeah, I totally agree. I think discernment is actually a word that we use a lot on the podcast as well, because it's so important. Discernment in what you're channeling and bringing through, discernment in or who's teaching you, discernment in what you're finding online. Because yeah, I think sometimes all of us can just get so sucked into the reels vortex of just swipe, 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 swipe. And I sort of had this moment a while ago of like, just having like an evening of swiping and then just having this weird coming into like consciousness moment that was like, holy shit, I am consuming way too much media. And like what I'm seeing on the screen is not really even real. Like, I don't even know this person. Do I trust this person? So much of that. So I think it is really important to, especially in this work, to find people you trust, to find teachers you trust, and to find media that you trust as well, for sure. It's huge.
That is so well said, incredibly well said. And another aspect of that is you may hear, oh my goodness, you have to take a class with so-and-so, or this person gave me the best, or listen to the show. If it doesn't resonate with you, then it's not for you. End of story. It's that clean. And what you're offering is helping people realize I have to find what fits for me. and you're giving them a
Yes.
variety of information. So that's incredible. The other thing is, so I'm going to jump back to the guides again. You just brought something up, and what it triggered in my mind was people are so afraid of bringing through something. I'm putting the proverbial air quotes on this, of bad or evil or dark, or I don't connect with that because it's not what I go looking for. I don't think you do either. But how do you open yourself up so that you are bringing in highest and best?
Yeah, that was one of my deepest fears, and one of the reasons I created the door, because one of the biggest stories that I was told growing up was, if you're connecting with anything, any spirit, it's a bad spirit. And that was just, yeah, it was really deeply ingrained in me. And so that was my belief for a long time of, the beginning of my life. And that's why I was so afraid and created that door. So I definitely understand that fear deeply. So if you have that same fear, I totally get you. And so this is also one of the reasons I took classes. And I think one of the biggest things that I use for connecting with that, for highest and best good energy, is intention setting. And I find this to be so, so important. We all know, especially if you listen to this podcast regularly, grounding and protection is something that I do every day. And then when I am reading for myself, or meditating and doing some sort of guided meditation for myself, or listening to one, and when I'm reading for people, I always set the intention very strongly to only connect with the highest and best good. And I think that intention setting within spirituality is just like one of the biggest building blocks. So if your intention is strong, I think you're good to go. And just know that you are divinely protected. And that's also another thing that I always say as a statement: I am divinely protected. And I think that really helps as well.
I agree. And it's getting into the ritual, the routine, the structure that works best for you, to know that you're safe to do this work and that you're ready to open up and bring through those messages. So what do you have coming up? What are some fun things that are coming up for you?
Yeah, well, speaking of spooky things, I am doing a virtual Zoom event with Anthony, who I mentioned a little bit previously in this episode. You will know Anthony if you listen to Opening the Door. He's on lots of episodes. He's kind of the podcast BFF, so we like to do events together. So this is our first virtual event. It's called Tipping the Table. It's a little bit of a nod to table tipping back in the day. But this is an event where we invite you to sit around the table with us and tell us your ghost stories and ask your questions. We're kind of getting into the spooky season, and know that you will be protected when you're in this space with us. But we just thought it would be fun to get people together and to tell their ghost stories for some fun. And we'll get some Q&A going, and maybe some readings at the end as well. So that is virtual on October 10th, 7:30 p.m. EST time. And you can grab tickets at openingthedoorpodcast.com. That is my event coming up. Obviously, I have podcasts dropping every Wednesday for you as well, if you're interested in checking the podcast out. And yeah, you can find all of that at openingthedoorpodcast.com.
That's beautiful. That is so beautiful. And I love that you're doing a variety of, yes, you do. So tell us just a little bit before we go about what your offerings are for readings, because you mentioned your mini readings, but what else if someone was interested in working with you, Haley?
Yeah, sure. So I have two types of mini readings. I have a higher self, connecting with your higher self mini reading, a connecting with your guides mini reading. I also have two wonderful guided meditations on my website. So if you want to, I have one that I just love doing myself. So I put it into a guided meditation, but that is basking in the universe's energy, which is just such a fun thing to do. And then I have a marinating in worthiness guided meditation too. So if you love guided meditations, check those out. And then in terms of working with me virtually over Zoom, I do offer readings, 30 minutes and 45-minute readings, where we will tap in, see if any of your loved ones want to come through and receive messages from your guides and higher self as well.
Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. So openingthedoor.com.
Openingthedoorpodcast.com.
Podcast.com. Okay, thank you. And that's how they can contact you. What about your socials? How can they find you there?
Yes. Okay, you can find me on TikTok. If you're on the TikTok, I'm Haley Bea Psychic there. And then on Instagram, I am Opening the Door Podcast. So you can find me on both those platforms. So much fun.
Okay, and I will definitely link all of these in the show notes. But thank you so much, Haley, because you're bringing a freshness, a new way of connecting, and you're incredibly genuine and true, which I think is such an asset to anyone that's looking for a good reader. So
Thank you
thank
so
you
much,
so very
Denise.
much. Oh,
Thanks,
you're
Denise. I had
amazing.
so much fun.
Again, thank you so much, Haley, for joining me. And for the rest of you, remember, there is something special that you came here to do that can make a difference. Take care.